Hi, good afternoon. So, this financial leadership, new tools and mindsets for uncertain times, which is certainly what we are living in right now. Thank you so much to USD for putting the Nonprofit Academy together and really always being so committed to this vital part of our community. Now more than ever, we need to have tools that help us to move forward in these wild times. So a little bit about me. I am co-founder and director of community engagement at Mission Driven Finance. Back up, my name is Lauren Grattan. I am on the board of Business for Good San Diego, which is a small business association for business owners that support policies that are good for workers, family, community, and environment. I do a bunch of other things. And what's really most important to me is building and reimagining new systems that work better for everyone and using business as a force for good to see how we can make the worlds of nonprofit and for-profit business closer aligned. So today I'll be talking to you about what's changed in this world and how to cultivate a framework of financial leadership. As we know, we have passed through normal times. We're no longer normal, and we might not ever have normal again. Things have changed rapidly. The next slide, please. Great. So what has changed? I don't think it's a shock to anybody that we have seen physical distancing as we take public health measures into very strong consideration. But that has led to also unemployment, which then trigger government programs. And then, of course, most recently, this reawakening to racism and having this renewed urgency and awareness. Next slide. What this means, though, for nonprofits, this means that as we're moving forward, these have effects on our businesses, on the way that we deliver our work. We have more remote services. We have changes to childcare, the remote work. I think everybody, I saw data from USD and from Catch a Fire that more than 70% of fundraising events had been canceled. So we're seeing a lot of changes to the nonprofit business model. We also see with unemployment that there's decreased consumer spending power, even though there are more and more services that are needed for direct support. But donor capacity is changing. Donor demands are changing. Government programs, obviously, most people have figured out that the SBA offered EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loans, as well as Paycheck Protection Program. There's also changes to government municipal budgets, to grants and contract programs. So we're seeing those kinds of changes. And then with the increase in anti-racism awareness and urgency, there's a mandate that programs actually promote justice and systemic conditions that increase transparency of how you actually deliver support to your community and to communities that particularly need more support that have been overlooked and underestimated for far too long. So these yellow boxes that then have shown up on here really are then what the financial effects are to change the landscape that we're operating in. We're seeing trends of increased online and distanced giving as people aren't giving in person anymore. You're not having coffee with your major donors. You're not having your gala. You're not having your golf tournament. So having a really strong online giving program and online engagement that helps to tell stories well. Coming around clockwise, those grants for COVID and or racial equity, these are really needing to step up our game as nonprofit fundraisers and financial leaders to be able to see how the connection between your programmatic work is then really coming through in the marketing and communications that drive the online and distance giving. We're also seeing bank credit tightening. I think this is the most painful for everyone, but as there are increased SBA programs and they're seeing these changes to the revenue streams for nonprofits with those decreased fundraising events and decreased ability of constituents to pay for services, that they're not really trusting that nonprofit organizations who provide such critical support for our communities are actually capable of paying for a loan. That's true for small businesses as well. Banks are generally just tightening down what kinds of loans they're making at this time. With the bank credit tightening, as well as this increased transparency around the programmatic effects of the work, we're seeing then also this slower but still important movement of private market innovation in impact finance. So being able to have foundations, high net worth individuals, private institutions like mine, Mission Driven Finance, that are working on using finance as a tool for change and being able to close gaps that are widening in this community. Great. I'm going to go to the next slide. And I'll note as a belated little bit of housekeeping that I'm happy to answer questions throughout this time. So as we go through the slides, we can also talk, answer specific questions about what we're seeing in the marketplace. And if we get to have time, that we can also have specific scenarios that folks are going through. But I offer this quote from an article from the Nonprofit Quarterly from Jean Bell, who talks about the distinction between financial management and financial leadership. Financial management is what we are generally used to, just producing data, making sure that the budget is happening, maybe going through your audit. But financial leadership is really leading your organization from a perspective of finance. My partner, who I co-founded Mission Driven Finance with, loves to jump into volunteer roles with nonprofits, first by joining their finance committee. Because in his opinion, when you're on the finance committee, you understand everything that's happening within the organization and you understand what's possible. And financial leadership is the type of thinking that, not unlike the exercise we just did, you think 3 steps ahead of how the landscape might be shifting and what that might mean for your role within a changing landscape. How does the change in the fundraising event landscape affect your ability to get a bank loan? What might you want to increase in your programs of having fee-for-service revenue or having contract revenue from governments? And what would need to be possible, or what would need to be true for you to move forward in getting those new revenue lines or increasing those revenue lines? So financial leadership is really this mindset of thinking about what is possible, or what could be possible if we look at our finances in a forward-looking fashion, instead of just making sure that we've put things in appropriately with the chart of accounts. Next slide. Great. So I think this is really what everybody wants right now. We want to know what changed in the capital landscape. Where can I get money? Because I don't know which way is up right now. What's been changing has been this focus of this pivot from traditional grant making in many ways to emergency and relief grants. There's been, obviously here in San Diego, the San Diego Foundation has been aggregating capital from many different parties. I think last I checked was over 14 million that they had raised for the COVID-19 Community Response Fund. So really to make sure that the nonprofits serving our county could have the resources that they needed, given that government contracts are being delayed, given that CDBG is moving around, that we could still offer support for those increased demands for direct service. We're also seeing, as we start to reopen, fingers crossed, start to reopen safely, that other organizations are thinking about how they can use their capital to accelerate the safe reopening and the recovery of our economy. So the San Diego Workforce Partnership, also with some support from the San Diego Foundation, and an organization called Raise, part of One Fair Wage. They've been working on these things called high road kitchens, of being able to take some philanthropic capital, some federal grant dollars, and be able to get hard to employ populations back to work, and using this in a restaurant setting where they can also be providing meals to frontline workers. So it's a win-win-win, but if you can figure out where these different pools of capital are, then you can also see how these rebuilding grants make sense. Of course, no conversation about the COVID-19 capital landscape is complete without talking about the Paycheck Protection Program and programs that came from the SBA and CARES Act. So this is really, the goals for this are to avoid layoffs, which now 3 months in, we've pretty much had those conversations, but also to pivot or repurpose your capacity. So these forgivable loans are pretty nice, gotta say. They are really flexible, friendly terms because of the imperative to get the economy moving again or keep it from completely cratering. So that's, you know, a little bit farther along. That's obviously capital that needs to be repaid for, in some ways, PPP, the amount that's being forgivable is shifting. But then we move into bridge loans, which are really to, as the government is strapped with being able to run a bunch of different programs, there are delays in grant and contracts. There's delays in payments, and colleagues of mine that have gotten FEMA contracts after disasters in the past had a contract awarded and were asked to start working on and fulfilling that contract, but know that they would not be paid for their work for another 18 months. So being able to have bridge loans helps for organizations that are providing key services or key goods to be able to actually fulfill those contracts and then get paid by the end beneficiary and the end providers. So there are some organizations that are starting to provide bridge loans really for that help in reopening again. And then working capital, project loans, lines of credit, those are typical products that you get from your bank. And while we are seeing bank credit tightening, those are still the best sources of capital for that. Community development finance institutions and banks are the friendliest in being able to get that money. So I put these little these arrows, or they're like a crescendo and decrescendo, but these little lines on the bottom to see that grants obviously are the tool that best serve you in being able to reopen. This is free money. From an investor's perspective, it's 100% financial loss. For you, it's 100% financial gain. And that ability to have capital is the most critical for when you're in an emergency situation. But as we move into reopening and rebuilding, we're going to be getting into seeing more and more capital providers that are seeking a return, usually a modest return, but some return financially on their capital as well. Our friends at the Nonprofit Finance Fund always maintain that using debt strategically can be a really powerful financial tool, and we believe that too. These can help to bridge to delayed revenue, like that example with a FEMA contract, or even pre-COVID, about a third of the loans that mission-driven finance has made were bridging to government supports, whether that was tuition payments for schools, for one Somali Family Service, bridging to them getting paid from CDBG through the city. So being able to make this work is always a good thing to explore, but particularly during this time when who has the most purchasing power is the government, being able to look at bridge loans as a way to tap into that source of revenue. So it is a riskier proposition to take on debt to plug a hole in your business or in your nonprofit particularly. If you've got a long-standing budget gap, there's something that is keeping you from making your payments on a regular basis, or you run the population that you serve cannot afford to pay what it costs for you to run the programs. Taking on debt can still be effective, but you want to be clear and have really strong conversations with your board about how you, what the source of repayment funds will be, how confident you are in being able to access them, and then how likely you are to actually secure those funds. Debt is in many ways a scary word, certainly personal debt, and how many of us have student debt. We don't always want to take that on for our organizations, but like I mentioned, there are some key cases when taking on new kinds of capital make a lot of sense. So a few tips and newer tools, moving on to the next slide, and then also the next. So you don't have just one source of capital, just like you don't have just one donor that makes your work possible, or I really hope you don't. From my background as a decade as a nonprofit fundraiser, I would be deeply uncomfortable if I had only one donor that was making my work possible. So you have a bunch of diversified donor base. You've got your grant strategy. Hopefully you have your major giving or some kind of online giving and direct individual engagement. Maybe you've got, in the past, events, corporate sponsorships, other types of revenue. The same is true for thinking about these new financial tools, that you can blend multiple sources and uses. This is a common term from construction financing, but for nonprofits that are thinking about what it's going to take to move forward, it might as well be building a new building. Thinking about how you can pair up some pieces of capital, some donors that want to come in and support your work, but they're feeling cash strapped themselves. Maybe they're only going to be able to provide a little bit, but you might be able to leverage that to unlock other resources. I had a client that was telling me that they had a very positive conversation with a large healthcare foundation, and that this is wonderful in and of itself, but also as a signal to potential outside funders, to potential investors that are seeking a financial return, that they've got the balance sheet capability to actually grow. So seeing some of that ability to raise grant money helps to also raise investment money. Hopefully we don't have too much of the spiral the other way, where then we'll have a widening gap between the super small nonprofits and the large established ones. But even being able to say how many donors have supported, even if that's at a $5 level, that's a demonstrated demand from the community, and it's a demonstrated way that you can say, we mean business, we're here to stay. So blend different sources and uses together. This is what we do as an investment firm, but there are all sorts of ways that you can do this with your nonprofit budget too. So next slide. I mentioned that very briefly that I run an impact investment firm. So what is that? What does this mean? What does this do for us in a changing environment? This is a quote from Kara Ballister. Her husband, Andy, is a co-founder of GoFundMe, but she and Andy have invested with us. And she says that, as consumers, we talk about voting with our dollars. Why wouldn't I do the same thing with our foundation investments? Why wouldn't I put my money to work building the world that I believe in? So we're starting to see an increased appetite, particularly with women and younger individuals as they come into wealth, that they want their money to be doing something good. This has been accelerating 10x through COVID, and certainly through this reawakening to systemic racism, that people realize there's no better time than now to make a change because the system is not working for us. So we're seeing more and more investors, individuals and institutions, that want to make a difference with their money. The next slide. So this is a definition from the Global Impact Investment Network of what is an impact investment. It's really just about any kind of financial vehicle It can be made into a company, an organization, or a fund with the intention of generating both measurable social or environmental impact and also financial return. What does that mean? This means that for the companies, organizations, funds that are raising impact investment dollars, that this is a way for you to not replace grants and donations, but to accelerate work. This can impact-based financing, impact investments into a nonprofit can accelerate projects. They can help you focus on sustainable practices, and they can help leverage more capital. One quick example of this is that we provided early stage bridge financing support to Access Youth Academy so that they could pay for architects and permitting and all sorts of stuff that goes into construction, which then unlocked new market tax credit financing for them to move into their own dedicated building. They're starting construction. Not sure how that's changed with economic closures, but they are going to be starting construction in Southeast and bringing an academic enrichment center to near Euclid and Market. So we provided $400,000 of financing partnership. We also had Alliance Healthcare Foundation and the San Diego Foundation, and then that unlocked $12 million in tax credits and construction financing. So it can be this point of accelerating or leveraging more dollars. This next slide is great, thank you. I like this definition of impact investing a lot better because mainstream investing is just moving money based on the future you predict, and impact investing is moving money based on the future you want, moving money with intention, really choosing to build a world that works better for everyone, or build a world that does not have environmental justice concerns, that we don't have to worry about the problems that keep us up at night. Impact investing is a way that we can use all of the financial tools in our tool belt, not only grants, but other strategies as well to really intentionally move the needle. So with that, we have, I work on both sides. I work with investors and with borrowers and community partners. So I do coaching both directions and help several organizations, several foundations and individuals and families to think about what their strategy is and what the future that they want to create is. And so with that, every investor has a strategy. Some of them are not fully baked yet. So just give them a little time or a little nudge. But every investor has a strategy that combines impact and financial returns including risk, their security, the timeline, and the rate of return. So being able to understand what the different preferences of a bunch of different investors are allows you to see how you fit into this. I liken it to how when you are raising money for an event, your approach to a credit union that does a lot of marketing and has a big spend and wants to see their logo everywhere is very different than if you're going after somebody that's going to contribute to the live auction. So you have very different approaches, and it's just figuring out what makes that person tick or what makes that organization tick. What's in it for them that you can offer. My friend Lehman always talks about how everybody's dialed into one radio station, WIIFM, of what's in it for me. So if you can understand what the motivations are for the financial entities that you're dealing with, whether those are individuals or organizations, then you can really respond to and show how you're adding value to the vision that they want to make in the world. So next slide, I'm going to talk about two quick programs. This one is a program that Mission Driven Finance has been working on with the San Diego Foundation, with Acumen, with the County Board of Supervisors, with California Southern, a lot of folks, to say we need another tool in our tool belt to be able to support the nonprofit community that's such a vital part of San Diego, and also to support small businesses who didn't get necessarily the kind of support that was intended by some of the programs that came out. So for the San Diego Foundation, they said, this is another tool that we can have. We've got a grant program, and that's fantastic, but we also have this money that has been earmarked for loans to nonprofits. Can we activate that and use this now? How do we get this into the hands of organizations? How do we not trip over the same challenges that plagued some of the other programs that came out? And how can we best serve the nonprofit community with the resources that they need to safely reopen? So the applications just went live earlier this week. So you can go to san diego sbnlp.org to apply for a loan. Unlike just about everything else that's come out lately, we are not doing this on a first come, first served basis, because then the folks that get in line first are the ones that are most advanced and have staff capacity and have those things. So this is going to be open until July 7th. You can apply. There's going to be, we'll review and assess all of the applications at that point. But so you don't need to rush, stay up tonight, getting in an application. We don't need you to lose any more sleep than you already have through the series of crises known as this year. So this nonprofit loan pool is providing loans of $50,000 to $300,000. As you can see, maximum term length is only 2.5 years. This is not the same as EIDL that has a 30-year term on it. So we recommend to nonprofits that you don't take on more than 30% of your annual revenue in debt. So if the minimum size is $500,000 revenue to be able to apply, then 30% of annual revenue means that you shouldn't take on more than $150,000 of total debt in this program. With a 30-month term, if we assume 0%, there's going to be a little bit of fluctuation in terms of the interest rate. But if we assume 0% and the longest term length, that means that there's a minimum $5,000 a month payment. So this is not meant for everybody. This is not meant to be the same thing as having a grant. This is meant to be supporting the safe reopening of your organization if you have future revenue that's coming in. So we talked to a great community-based organization last night and said, hey, nobody in my community is going to qualify for this. We really need a grant. Like, you do, you really need a grant. If you can't safely pay this kind of money, you shouldn't take on a loan. And that's part of why mission-driven finance is here, is to help demystify it and make sure that you don't take on any kind of debt that is going to put your business or your nonprofit organization in a bad position. We are burdened enough. You do not need the extra burden of debt that you're worrying about how you're going to figure out how to pay for it. So the eligibility, you just got to be in San Diego County or serving San Diego County residents for the last 1.5 years. There's a bunch of questions that have been answered on our website. And also on Friday, we'll be having an interactive information session. So you can sign up to participate in that webinar on the website below. And thank you, Laura, for the comment. Laura Dietrich knows that we've been going hard at work on this. So we're excited to be able to add to this tool belt of solutions for the nonprofit community and get this money moving. So we're anticipating that first loans are going to go out in early July, fingers crossed, but we'll keep you posted. Before we move on from this, I do want to note that we really are prioritizing organizations that are addressing COVID-19, their physical and mental health effects, as well as the economic effects, and particularly those that are serving communities disproportionately affected by the pandemic. We know that this has not been having an equal effect on communities all over the place. South Bay is having a much different response to COVID than Mission Hills, right? So we want to be able to see how and certainly the San Diego Foundation and Alliance Healthcare Foundation, who've provided the initial funding for this, want to see that we're really moving the needle. for them, as they think about impact investing, moving money based on the future they want to be moving our community to be more equitable, and for the health effects, the economic effects, to be ameliorated through this fund. Great. So briefly, the next slide is for what mission-driven finance provides for nonprofits. We are a private impact investment firm. I mentioned before that my background was as a decade as a nonprofit fundraiser. My partner, David Lynn, has been, I don't know, he's done a lot of things, but he came from data and reporting. He worked with some high net worth families, managing traditional investment management for them, as well as then got involved with the philanthropic community. So we started mission-driven finance to address this growing interest in impact investing. We had a lot of foundations that were coming to us saying, what is this impact investing thing? How can I do it? And a lot of organizations coming to us saying, hey, we've got this really cool project. We've got this great plan, but I don't have enough capital to make it happen. Can you help me think about that financial leadership aspect? What other pools of capital could we draw on for us to make this possible? And so really through those early conversations, we realized, look, we need to have a high-functioning intermediary here in San Diego that can help organizations to better connect capital and community. So what we started with, what I call our House Blend Fund, is Advance. And this is a fund that provides loans to advance inclusive economic opportunity in San Diego. Has to be a minimum of 80% of the portfolio in San Diego. So we do a little bit outside of the county. We lend in this specific gap where we realized that nonprofits were having a hard time, and small businesses having a hard time getting access to capital above microfinance or above what a board member specifically would make a loan for, but below what a bank would do. And so really trying to close this gap and make it possible for great organizations to have the capital they need to succeed. So all of these terms existed pre-COVID. Our sources of capital require that we have a little bit higher of an interest rate, back to our prior chart with a bunch of different types of the capital landscape. We're on the far right in that diagram of we need to have an interest rate that is still a lot cheaper than financing your business on a credit card, but is certainly above what the SBA federal government money is. So that's really briefly about the terms of the structure. And we really are trying to help as many organizations as possible. And our approach is just a little bit different in that we have a conversation. We have a conversation and get to know what your hopes and dreams are, what your plans are, and see how finance can help accelerate those plans. We have custom technical assistance. We'll help you. We don't just underwrite and, like I had in the past, I won't ever name names, but would write a grant application and get a rejection notice and not ever know where things went wrong or where things were not aligned. We'll be extremely transparent throughout and say, here are opportunities to improve your organization. Any lender that looks at your materials is going to have some questions around these pieces. And here are some resources that we recommend, or here's a particular organization or workshop that you should go to be able to help close that gap. And likewise, if we're not the right financial institution, to the best of our ability, we will make referrals, warm handoffs, not just go check these people out, but if an actual introduction to other people that we know will take good care of you. So if you have any questions about other capital beyond what you need immediately to reopen, Mission-Driven Finance is here to help you think about those strategies. So we do that. We do some other larger investment strategies as well, but you can find out more at the website that's listed here. Finally, I just wanted to leave us with a couple of resources on the next slide. These are, there we go. So you can see the website for the San Diego County COVID-19 Small Business and Nonprofit Loan Program. It's a mouthful, but you can find out more information about SBNLP at that website. I'll also put in my own personal plug for Fortify from USD, School of Leadership and Education Sciences, and Fieldstone Leadership Network. They've done a phenomenal job of putting some programming together at either membership rate or low cost, and really, really good programs. Bob Beatty has done a phenomenal financial scenario planning session, and I highly recommend that if you're wondering, when's the right time to reopen? How should I be doing things safely? How can I be starting to get more revenue coming in the door? That Bob session is one that you check out. Nonprofit Quarterly and their overview of financial leadership has some other great resources to continue your journey and thinking, really adopting like a culture of philanthropy, but a culture of financial understanding where we're not just talking about the programs, we're also talking about what's really needed to make that happen. That NPQ's Financial Leadership Series is fantastic for that. And lastly, or not lastly, sorry, Acumen Academy, formerly Plus Acumen, from the large international impact investment firm Acumen. They make social enterprise resources available, again, at low or no cost. They have phenomenal courses. I've taken 3, but they have one on financial modeling for social organizations. So you can see some other hands-on supports. And then last of these ones is the Nonprofit Finance Fund. They are a community development finance institution that lends only to nonprofit organizations. So they really understand the nuances of what a nonprofit business model is like. They have great tools that they put together. I love them so much. I think everybody should take a look at them. But on NFF's website, check out their COVID-19 tools and resources. They have videos that go along with each of the tools so that you can actually understand what they look like in practice instead of just having a blank template. Great. So with that, the last slide is just mission-driven finance and our call to you to consider about how you want to create a new world. At our organization, we believe that we all do better when we all do better, that we need to better connect communities and capital. Everybody, particularly poignant now, we see how important it is to have strong and equitable employment practices so that we can weather crises together and that we are stronger together. So thank you for your time and feel free to send me any questions. Oh, wonderful point from Wilda from my team, who's the best, that you can reach out to Mission Driven Finance at borrow@missiondrivenfinance.com. We are always happy to take your inquiries, to talk you through different scenarios, particularly during this really, truly wild time. Having somebody that will listen, we are willing to be that for you. We're willing to be that for you, even not during wild times. I think I talked a lot faster than anticipated. Okay, are new relief grants available? This is a great question from Bayside Community Center. There are some new relief grant programs that are coming up. The San Diego Grant Makers is helping the city of San Diego to deploy their capital. City of San Diego, of course, also the headline sponsor of today's Nonprofit Academy. There are also some new additions to the San Diego Foundation's COVID-19 Community Response Fund. And as we work closely with the San Diego Foundation, we're also mindful that not everybody makes sense for a loan. And so if you don't have a loan, you really need a grant. That we're trying as much as possible to coordinate between our organizations and make sure that the right and right-sized capital is being connected for you. As far as new relief grant programs, at this point, it feels a lot like folks are waiting for the federal government to make their next recommendation. Some foundations, again, keeping them anonymous, have said, yeah, we're not really the best at pivoting. Our boards only meet every 6 months. So they have yet to figure out their COVID response strategies or if they will have them. Many are returning a bit to their normal grant making. So those that had strong relationships with in the past, it's worth having a conversation with them and expressing how critical it is at this time to be able to support your work, having some data around your program numbers, having some data around your employees, and getting them back to work, and your plans for safe reopening are going to be really good fodder for conversations with your funders. It's a tough time to be thinking about finding new funders that will support your work, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. You know, from my life as a development director, it feels like kissing a lot of frogs. But there are, I would say, if you have not already gotten into the San Diego Foundation's Community Response Fund, it's very prominent on the San Diego Foundation website, I would start there. A few other resources are available as well on our website at missiondrivenfinance.com. In the banner, there are resources about COVID, and you can see and sort down to resources specific for nonprofits. Of course, USD is also incredible at supporting the nonprofit community. If you go to the Nonprofit Institute webpage, they also have additional resources. They, of course, have the most research. Thank you all for filling out your surveys when you get those from Laura and her team. But they also have, and Fieldstone and the Fortify program have more of the resources specifically for nonprofits. Oof. So many nonprofits lost fee-for-service sources. Are there other financial models to do well during the pandemic? You know, I did a lot of counseling for small businesses, sole proprietors and other small businesses, but moving to online delivery, trying to have other ways of delivering your model. Kid Ventures started having daily preschool by YouTube channel. So having educational enrichment, and they had a much reduced fee. So they didn't have all of the revenue that they would have had if students were coming to their classroom on a daily basis. But they were able to provide some of that and have the loss not be a full loss. Other structures, I think that now is a great time to take advantage of a little bit of quiet to figure out what should we be like going forward. How much reliance on government support makes sense? Or are there new contracts, we know a few organizations that have grown more during this time than any other time. Food banks have done a lot of work lately. So being able to see where those financial wins are moving, see how where are things that are likely. We did an exercise with our team. We brought on 5 new community finance fellows, individuals from overlooked and underestimated communities, to be part of our team for a year. They started March 23rd, a real weird time to start a new job for a year. But we did an exercise with them of thinking about who has money to spend right now. We've got the federal government, we've got CARES Act money flowing through municipal governments. There's a really interesting diagram of how CARES money is flowing through states and then into municipalities and directly to individuals and households. But there are new programs. Just today or yesterday, City Council of San Diego approved 12 million-ish for small businesses in the city. So I did not see yet if nonprofits are included in that, but being able to see some other strategies. Who else is paying for things besides fee for service? Not besides fee for service, but besides government, there's hospitals and healthcare systems also have capital available. So tapping into any way that you can provide support, provide services to those industries that actually have revenue or have cash on hand is a great way to think about how you might pivot best. In terms of other financial models, pay for success is a somewhat complicated way of thinking about things, but outcomes-based financing, now with quiet time, mostly, could be a good time to explore how you can think about different structures for growing your work going forward. Or if you have realized during shelter in place that you don't need to have as many staff as you did before, it's a heartbreaking conversation to have staff reductions on an ongoing basis. But you can think about what kind of true assets and liabilities you have for the new world of work. Having more telehealth and behavioral health that's distanced, you can potentially change how you are staffing your organization and have some operational efficiencies that allow you to be nimble moving forward. Great question, Tom. Hi, Alex. I haven't seen Alex in a long time. San Diego Arts and Culture Challenge Grant just issued its first round of relief funding. The next round will open for applications soon. That is phenomenal. Arts and culture are so critical, and they help keep us sane, particularly in times of adversity. So really, really grateful that this challenge grant is open. So check that out. Thank you, Alex Goodman, for the tip. Yes, very, very, very aware of the reality of grants versus loans. Thank you, Bayside. There is a major difference between those, and we realize that there is more money out there that is seeking some kind of return, but we're trying to educate both sides on how we can best select the tool for the challenge that we're facing. Fantastic. Really great questions. I realized today that I also have my amazing USD water bottle that everybody is jealous of. So I'm full of USD pride. I will note that during this time, like a lot of people have been home and doing a lot of deep self-reflection on your personal lives. Again, this is a phenomenal silver lining for us to think critically about our organizations. How many times have we not been able to get to a strategy update or get to some deep thinking about the future of our work because we've been running around to the next meeting, to the next fire drill? Not everybody is having quiet time. A lot of people are extremely busy. But this is a really fantastic opportunity to think critically about what you want to be moving forward and how you want to support the community. I think as we do more education of investors, hearing also your stories of the challenges. Bayside Community Center just put one in the chat of thinking about relief grants. Having more stories of what's critically needed helps us to be able to push investors a little bit on better understanding and right-sizing their reaction to financial realities. So please, by all means, share what's going on with you. Share it in the chat, share it to Borrow at Mission Driven Finance. But we take your stories and your experiences seriously. That's why, as we help to design the SBNLP program, that we said, we can't have it be first come, first serve. We can't have these structures be in place because they're driving our community nuts. We can't leave our communities that don't have a dedicated fundraising consultant on hand. We can't leave those communities behind. So making sure that we're having more equitable practices, or if you're feeling excluded from something, we want to hear that. And if you don't fit exactly neatly into the criteria that are there, that we might be able to wiggle a little bit to better understand what the community needs. We can only do what the community needs if we hear from you. And so your voice is critically important. It helps to shift policy. It helps to shift uppercase P policy, helps to shape lowercase p policy of what happens in institutions. So please use your voice. The Nonprofit Institute team has done such an incredible job, and the Castor Family Foundation for Nonprofit Research do a great job of making the case of why we should listen to nonprofits and why we should support nonprofits. Make up, I think, 9% of the employment base, 7% of the wages. It's really important that our nonprofit community continues to thrive and that we listen to the needs of the nonprofit community so that we can get the right resources out to them. So we want to make sure that we are sensitive to your needs. So use your voice. And thank you. We love Linda Vista, and our office is in Old Town. Thank you, Bayside. Loving all of this love from you. And Thrive was the very first organization that we funded. So know your community well and love it, and miss going out to get excellent Thai food up the street. Will the SBNLP be available for churches? Rick, that is a great question. So the requirements for the fund, or the eligibility, do state that the purposes of the capital are not for proselytizing, but we fully recognize that many churches and faith-based organizations are providing key direct service. So if the use of capital is for the delivery of direct services, then yes, churches can apply for the SBNLP program, the nonprofit loan pool of that. Again, the only two requirements are that this is not, the use of proceeds is not for advocacy or for the direct ministry. Ministry of Work and of Public Works and Goods is absolutely okay and encouraged. So much of our faith community is really, really important in making sure that overlooked communities get the love that they need. Oof. Tom coming in hot with the tough questions. Do you possibly see the pandemic as an opportunity to dismantle current practices in finance that might not be equitable and rebuild? Short answer, yes. Long answer, this is what we were built for. This is what mission-driven finance is all about. We have recognized since our founding in 2016 that the system, structures, and policies that created our economic system are intentionally and unintentionally built to exclude certain populations. They're not meant to be equitable. And we are doing our best to show that you don't have to do it this way. For the loans that we make, we don't look at personal credit scores. We are doing commercial loans. We think that personal credit scores are racist, and we don't believe in them. So we don't use them. We also are pushing, and like right now, we've put more than $5 million out into the San Diego community, and all of our borrowers are still paying. We're able through our practice, which is admittedly small in the grand scheme of the financial system, we're able to demonstrate that you can underwrite and perceive risk differently. A credit score that's below 600 does not mean that you're a bad borrower. It may mean that you have had terrible student loans or maybe a bad divorce, or you did not inherit wealth beforehand. It doesn't necessarily mean that your organization shouldn't be able to access capital and grow. So it's absolutely an opportunity for us to rebuild, and where I talk about we don't want to rebuild exactly the way that it's been. We want to rebuild anew. We want a new normal that works better for everyone. I was on a call or a webinar that Rise led a few weeks ago. It was phenomenal, but hearing from Armand King from Paving Great Futures, love Armand, but he said, normal wasn't working for us. Normal meant that our students were going missing from the school district and people didn't realize it. Normal meant that I was worried about my students and the youth that I work with getting shot on their way to school or on their way to our program. Normal meant that we weren't being talked about. So I think particularly these twin pandemics that we have that are also intertwined of COVID-19 and this racial awakening is really an opportunity for us to say, the system is broken. The system has not been serving us all very well. That we have the opportunity to see other models that work and that do actually uplift all together, that we can do away with a lot of the policies that come from really prejudiced places. I went nerding out on unemployment insurance because why not? But unemployment insurance is always extremely difficult to access, but it actually came from, a lot of the challenges came from the South and passing legislation and specifically excluding agricultural and domestic workers because those were largely Black populations. And they did not want to be able to have a safety net for the Black community. And so that had also an effect on poor white communities in rural places, had an effect on Latina and Latinx communities that are also doing a lot of that work. And so a couple of decades later, some of those policies have gotten repealed, but they still have roots in racism. And as we come back to what the intended and unintended consequences of these lowercase p and uppercase p policies are, then we have an opportunity to reimagine how things can be going forward, and to really think about a future. Again, when I introduced myself, I said I like to reimagine and reinvent systems and create a world that works better for everyone. But we really do have this opportunity now, as more people have woken up to the fact that racism is real and that our systems have not been built to serve everyone. So yeah, you had the short answer of yes, Tom, and then the really long answer of it's time. It's long past time. It's been 500 years in the making. Thank you, Rick. I'm really glad that so many of you have joined us in the chat. That's why I'm here. I personally am a fan of the interactive conversation, so that's also why we've had so much time for Q&A. Happy if anybody has further questions or you want to just listen to me monologue some more, throw it in there and I'll happily respond. Thank you, Bayside. We also wish more funders shared our perspective. There's an increasing set there. I will note nationally, there are more foundations that are joining affinity groups. It's a lot of the same foundations that show up in the same kinds of conversations, but justice funders, asset funders or asset-based funders, something like that. There's a new funder network for organizations that are supporting inclusive entrepreneurship. And so there are many that have, in large part through the advocacy of W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the Ford Foundation, have realized that there are better ways of doing things. And leadership as well from the financial perspective. The Heron Foundation, based out of New York, they do amazing work thinking about financial innovation and using all the tools in their toolbox, grants, loans to CDFIs, loans to nonprofits that are providing first-time homeowners with mortgages. They think about the full spectrum of their global portfolio and say, how can I use this to advance my mission? So gratefully, in the about 12 years since the term impact investing got coined at the Rockefeller Foundation, we've seen a really big uptick. Usually I talk about a normal introduction to impact investing presentation, but nothing feels normal anymore, so I didn't do that. But in the years since this has gotten coined, we're seeing an exponential growth. We're seeing more and more individuals and institutions that are realizing that I need to not have my money that is making money for itself but destroying the world on one hand, and have my grants in a very small hand on the other side. They're seeing this integrated capital spectrum. So we're in coalition and we're in cahoots with a lot of other organizations across the country that are hoping and trying to push on this narrative of thinking about how we can do things differently. If there are specific organizations or funders that you would like us to talk to and help them to think through the logic of their approaches, those are our original roots. We're happy to have sessions specifically oriented to those with the financial assets, and we can help them to think through their strategies to move forward and to move forward in service of the community. Let's see, I was thinking about another organization. Justice funders, asset funders. The RSF Social Finance. They are based in Oakland. The RSF Social Finance, they do larger transaction sizes, but they have an integrated capital fellowship The first cohort, we had a San Diegan, Mary Abad, a wonderful person. Mary was a part of the initial and integrated capital fellowship, but this movement to build the financial leadership within a variety of institutions, and they get together, or now virtually get together and have a few weekends a year of deep dive sessions on how you can use a full spectrum of financial tools to advance a social mission. I highly encourage checking out RSF Social Finance and the work that they have put forward. It's fairly accessible and can help you have conversations with your board members and your existing donors too, that are different conversations than you would usually have. Along those lines, one of our other projects outside of Advance, that House Blend Fund that we run, we have also provided about $1.5 million loan to Habitat for Humanity as a Habitat for Humanity San Diego, I should clarify. But with San Diego Habitat, that we provided capital and we helped them to have different conversations with their donor base about investing on top of their donation, unlocking further pools of capital than they would ordinarily just give. So a few donors that I think were in the more like $10,000 to $50,000 range for them to invest at the $100,000 or $200,000 level. So impact investing and these kinds of integrated capital conversations can really open up a new dialogue with your existing base of support. You can have extremely different conversations than you used to about buying a table at the gala. You can have a conversation about how they really want to build a new world and how you can be part of that, and how you have put together this vision during your pandemic time to see this is how we should be moving forward. Now that I've read the entire internet and watched all of Netflix, I can tell you that this is how our organization should be growing moving forward. And here's how you can help be part of it. Really having a conversation from a place of financial leadership instead of just from a place of here's the opportunity that we have in this very moment, but here's the opportunity we have to really move the needle. Oh, Bayside. Is there a sense of how long the San Diego Foundation waits before awarding relief grants or loans? Pending status has been for a while. I do not have a sense of how long they wait. Honestly, their team has been busier than ever. It's a testament to the team at the San Diego Foundation that they managed to deploy in 2 months what they usually do in a year. There's been a huge outpouring of capital to the program, but even more so, there's been an outpouring of need from the nonprofit community. I don't know how many applications they got, but I do know that they have been diligently wading through them. There are 12,000 registered nonprofits in the county, and I think most of them have submitted an inquiry. So it's a lot. It's a lot on their team. They're doing their best. And we also, like I said before, we are encouraging them to look specifically at those community-based organizations, not just the large nonprofits that have the capacity to serve a variety of communities, but those that are deeply situated in and with their community, like Bayside and Linda Vista, like some organizations we know in Southeast, and some other organizations in South Bay where we see particularly strong programs and opportunities, but that really need to have some grant support. So I wish I had a more concrete answer. but know that the team is trying very hard to support as many as possible. And also that with SB and LP, the loan program side, that we are actively raising more capital. Part of why we list a range of potential interest rates for nonprofits of 0 to 3% is that we're in dialogue with some banks and some other financial institutions to add capital to the current 5.2 million so that we can grow that hopefully to 10 or 20 million and get more capital into the hands of organizations that need it. But they may need to have a small amount of interest payments. So we think that paying, like if a bank came in and provided another 5 million at 2%, that our blended rate of 10 million at 1% is better than having 5 million at 0. That's better for the overall community. So we are diligently trying to get more capital into that program. And I know the San Diego Foundation is also working to get more grants raised to better support all of the great organizations across the county. Oh, I guess the other part of the question from Bayside was on the loan program side. We are keeping the loan application open for almost 1 month, at which point we anticipate having rolling closes where we will be hopefully moving. We'll see what the response is like, how many applications we get in, but we will be attempting to move things quickly. So within about four to 6 weeks, hopefully, moving forward with loan application and closing. We know that certainly times are tough, and the longer things take, the more stressful it is. So we are mindful of that. It's part of why we said, okay, we can do this, is we had those 5 community finance fellows join our team in March. They have been phenomenal, and they are ready to start underwriting and to start assessing and supporting the nonprofit inquiries that come in. So we have expanded our team to be able to best support the community, and we will be turning around approvals and funding as quickly as we can. Got probably another 30 seconds and then need to wrap up. If anybody has a last question, we are happy to answer anything further. Yeah, the San Diego Foundation, goodness, I don't know what kind of position we'd be in without them. We've been doing some other work with municipalities in smaller metropolitan areas around the country, and they don't have a strong community foundation like the San Diego Foundation. We also have the Jewish Community Foundation, Rancho Santa Fe Foundation, and International Community Foundation. We're very fortunate to have 4 community foundations in the county, but one particularly enormous one. But working with other smaller communities that don't have the financial sophistication or the community orientation that many of the San Diego Foundation team have, we're very lucky to have such a strong leader in the community. I do know that the Jewish Community Foundation also has programs that are available. If you have not yet already checked out their site for how they are supporting during COVID-19, I know Beth has been raising significant capital from her donors as well to get that money moving as quickly and expediently as possible. I applaud Beth Cyril from JCF so much for pushing her DAF's donors with donor advised funds. She says repeatedly, there has never been a better time to empty your DAF than now. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the sessions, and thank you to USD.